It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Our conversation this morning with Michelle Commander is brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Michelle D. Commander is the Associate Director and Curator of the Lapidus Center, and she joins us today to talk about an amazing book, Unsung-Unheralded Narratives of American Slavery and Abolition. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and it's good to have you with us here today. This is a tremendous undertaking by you and a lot of other people, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
The book itself. Tell me, first of all, if you would, about the Schomburg Center.
Well, the Schomburg Center was founded in 1925 as the 135th Street branch, the Division of History, Literature, and Print. And this particular institution was, the first collection was from Arturo Schomburg, and it was a collection of his items, somewhere around 10,000 items that he had collected as a bibliophile, or someone who was just really interested in the history of people of African descent over the course of several years. And so he sold that initial collection to the New York Public Library to establish a collection here, and it has grown over the years to over 11 million items.
And you've read them all.
I wish.
But my goodness, Michelle, how did you come to this? Because in reading the foreword, of course, we get an idea of it, and you and your associate Kevin Young putting this all together. What was it that brought you to the Schomburg Center and to this collection?
Well, this particular collection, the Schomburg collection, I knew about as someone who had just done Black Studies for so many years as a graduate student and as a professor at the University of Tennessee. And so when the opportunity was here to leave that job at the University of Tennessee as a professor and come work as a curator to create exhibitions and public programming, to do the work of making a book like this, which is in some ways interpreting our collection, I jumped on that opportunity. And so a couple of years ago, Kevin Young, who is now our former director, had an idea for a new series that the Schomburg would undertake with Penguin Classics that would try to do some work with these 11 million items to figure out some major themes that would be great for the public to be able to see in a book, right? So even if the book is 656 pages and, seemingly a lot, that they would get a fuller understanding of Black history and culture.
And such a wonderful job of it. There are voices, of course, which are quite well known to us as a general public, but some of the voices that we're reading here in this book, Unsung, are just, they're voices that are fresh to us, and they're very rare in that in their day and age to have written histories of any sort, whether in letter form or in essay form or in whatever form. It was very, very rare, was it not?
Absolutely. It was rare, and it was also a brave thing to do, to write say an editorial or a speech, or to give a speech in person, right, that goes so far against the order of the day was a brave thing to undertake as well. So it was rare, but you do have these individuals who basically say, according to how I believe religiously, according to my Christian faith, I cannot, in good conscience, allow slavery to happen, right? I have to do something. Or according to how I feel as a human being, this institution is incorrect, and I will use my skills as a poet, as a novelist, as a playwright, as a children's story author, to do what I can to convince people, to convince my fellow citizens that this is incorrect. We need to make some changes. And so I really wanted to bring forward some of these lesser-known names. Now, if you're someone who is a history professor or just a history buff, there could be a couple of names in the text that you are familiar with, but I bet there's a whole lot of other folks that you have not heard of and some of the great things that they did to fight for abolition.
One of the names that is, and I'm just going to spring this name and throw this name at you here, and I don't know that
Okay.
you'll know this one off the top, but his name was Charles Ball, and he writes from a book called 50 Years in Chains, or The Life of an American Slave. This is something written in 1860 or published in 1860, and he talks about his experiences as a slave on a tobacco plantation in Maryland, and it is so absolutely moving. And so horrifying and at the same time uplifting to watch his life and how he looks back on it. Charles Ball is a typical story, is he not?
I would say that there are contours to his story that are a little different, like service in war and some of the things that he experienced. But I will say that of the stories that are collected here, the narratives that are collected here, there are these moments that things look hopeful that you can see in almost every narrative that's imparted here. So I tried very hard to find narratives that were unfamiliar, but also that didn't do too much in the way of suggesting that slavery was all encompassing, and that Black people, these enslaved people, were not able to make spaces of joy or to create family and kinship networks, or that somehow every story ended in death or just despair. So Charles Ball is one of those stories, along with several others as well. So in some ways he has some rarities to his story, but also I did intentionally set out to not depress the reader too far, but to suggest that it wasn't always the case that people were left just so defeated by slavery.
And so we read the stories of people like John Anderson and his escape from slavery. But one of the things, by the way, I need to reset the button here. Michelle Commander is with us this morning, and the book is called Unsung: Power Concedes Nothing Without a Demand. Unheralded Narratives of American Slavery and Abolition. One of the favors that you do for us, Michelle, is you include stories of people who are actually being brought to America as slaves on ships. And that experience is something that we probably, without a few movies in the last few years, we don't know that story as well as we should.
Absolutely. There are very few accounts, first-person accounts from people who were taken as African captives through the Middle Passage. One well-known example is Equiano's narrative, which I quote a bit within the introduction to the text to give a sense of what he was feeling. So Equiano certainly gives the sensory impressions about thinking about what that space felt like, what it felt like to be chained to people who were dead or dying, people who were getting sick on themselves, people who took suicidal leaps into the Atlantic because they had no idea where it was they were being taken, and they thought that if they perished, that they will return spiritually back to their homelands. And so within a couple of other narratives within the text, again, there's not a whole lot of them that discuss what it meant to be on the Middle Passage. We do get some insight into what it felt to be stripped from your culture, from your mother and your father, and dragged into the uncertainty of slavery in the New World.
We are running out of time this morning with Michelle Commander. I did want to highlight the children's literature aspect of this. There's a poetry section, a children's literature and drama section. The kids' literature section to me is fascinating, and the inclusion of it in this book is I think, very, very important. And so while we don't have time to talk about it, I do want to highlight the fact that it is there. And the decision-making process that you had to go through with so much material at hand, I know for you it must have been heartbreaking to leave some of these things out that are just as important as what made it into the book.
Absolutely. So I kind of held my nose. I knew what the page limit was originally, kind of held my nose and sent what I wanted to send, and then I had to reduce. I got a note back that I needed to reduce some items. So there are more narratives that I would have included, more of the children's literature that I would have included in the text. But I still feel that each section does a great job of giving people insight. And I've included a suggested reading list within this volume, but also people should know that whether they live in New York or not, we have items that are here. They can be scanned for a nominal fee, but there are state archives all over that have, these slavery documents or business records from people who were not even in the U.S. South, but who maybe were in the Northeast or parts of the Midwest that where slavery was the order of the day. And people can still find these other kinds of narratives if they're interested after reading Unsung that will give them further insight into the institution.
It is an amazing book, a very, very necessary book, and it's called Unsung, Unheralded Narratives of American Slavery and Abolition. It's edited by the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Michelle Commander, thank you so much for visiting with us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Have a wonderful day today.
You too.